Now, in the last lesson, we looked at using Apple's new tool, which is USDZ Converter, in the command line to convert a 3D model into the latest file format, which is the USDZ format. And we now have our 3D model of Eevee ready to go and ready to incorporate into our ARKit project. We're going to place it under our art.scn assets folder. So in order to do that, we're going to bring up the folder that contains the eevee.usdz file, and then we're just going to drag and drop it into our art.scn assets folder. And now it's incorporated in here, and it's now ready for use inside our project. What you see on the left here is that there are 3 nodes that make up this Eevee. And the 3 of them are variously the eyes, the body, and the mouth. And together they comprise this entire 3D model. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to convert this USDZ file format to a SCN file so that we can use it with our SceneKit framework, which we're using to render our object in ARKit. So selecting this file, go to Editor and click on Convert to SceneKit Scene File Format, and go ahead and click Convert. And now our Eevee is now available as a scene file, just as we had in the original example project where they had the plane that came with the template project. We now have our Eevee as the same file format. And you can see over here on the left that we've got 3 nodes. One that represents the eyes and the textures for the eyes, another that is for the body, and the final one which is for the mouth. And we want to combine all 3 of these into a single node. So we're going to select all 3 and click Flatten Selection. And now we only have a single node that is the entirety of the Eevee. So if you click on that node, you can rename it to something that makes a little bit more sense rather than Mesh 1 or Mesh 2. And we can rename it simply Eevee. Now, inside the navigator, you can obviously rotate it around or zoom and pan. And if you ever lose your Eevee for any reason, just double click on the node and it'll come back to you in the center of the screen. Now, the other thing that we need to do is at the moment, our Eevee is gigantic. It's about 4 meters in width, 3 meters in height, and 4 meters in depth. So it's a bit too big. So let's scale it down to 0.05 for all 3 of these dimensions. And double click to bring it into the center. And I've had to play around with the size and the scale of this particular model, and it seems like the 0.05 scale brings it to quite a nice size in comparison with our Pokemon card. So now that we've done everything we need to do with our Eevee model, it's time to head back into the view controller, and we're going to create our Eevee on top of the card. So as we know, the plane node is the 3D object that gets placed on top of the image that's detected, which is the Pokemon card. And it's on top of that plane that we want to place our Eevee 3D model. So at the end of this if-let statement, let's create a new scene, and let's call it PokeScene. And this is going to be a SCN scene, which is created by using a file that is named art.scnassets/eevee.scn. So this is referring to this scene file here. And this is the one that we're going to load up and we're going to present onto our plane here. Now this again will be optional because there might not be an eevee.scn file at the art.scn assets folder. Now because we can see it right here and it definitely exists, you can either choose to force unwrap this, or if you want to play it safe, simply create another if-let and we can use optional binding to make sure that we definitely get a PokeScene that gets created. Now inside this if-let, we're going to create a node that is going to represent the Eevee. So we'll call it PokeNode. and it's going to be equal to PokeScene dot root node dot child nodes dot first. And this is one of the reasons why it makes it easier to merge all three of those nodes into one, because the first node is simply the Eevee in its entirety. And this makes it easier to work with it when we're using code. So again, this might be equal to nil, so therefore it is an optional, because there might not be any child nodes in the root node of the PokeScene. But as we know there is, you can either choose to, again, force unwrap this object and specify and override this safety check, or you can again create a if-let statement. And we're kind of getting into the if-let pyramid kind of scenario, which happens very often when we're using Swift. But nonetheless, it does work quite well. So now that we've got our PokeNode and we know that it definitely contains a child node of some sort, namely our Eevee model, then we can add this PokeNode to our plain node, which already exists. So we can say plain node.add child node, and the node is going to be the PokeNode. So that's all we need to do to add our Pokemon to the plain node, which is attached to the position and size of the image that was detected. So now we can give this a run and see whether we manage to render our Eevee onto the position of the card. So here's my app running, and when I flip over the image, it gets recognized and my Eevee shows up on screen. Now, because my card's quite shiny, and when it has glare, the image is very difficult to see for the camera, and it loses the image recognition. So you can see when I try to face this towards the window, you can see that there's a brief moment when the image is not so clear and I lose my model. But if I face it away from the glare, you can see that that image is quite stable. So this is something that you have to take into account when you are designing these apps for use with a particular image. So there is my Eevee, and it's kind of like being bisected by my card, which is a bit gruesome. In order for it to be sitting on top of the card, then I have to again rotate it in the same way that I rotated my plane previously. Now, another thing that you notice is that my Pokemon looks a little bit dark. It doesn't look like it's been lit. My model doesn't seem to have a light source. So let's head back into our code and see if we can fix that. Now, adding lighting to the scene in ARKit is incredibly easy. All we need to do is just go up to our view.load and tap into our scene view and toggle the setting for Auto enables default lighting. And this allows SceneKit to automatically add light to the scene. And if we set that to true, then it will be switched on. And when I run this app again, you can see the difference. So you can see now my Eevee that's being rendered is much brighter and it's more easy to see all of its features. Now, there's just one problem though. It's kind of sitting in the middle of my card. And what I really want it to do is to sit on top of my card so that when I have my card flat, it's as if it's standing on the card. Because at the moment, the way that it looks is a bit weird. It's kind of like my Pokemon's fallen over and it needs help or something. Whereas I kind of want it to be standing up straight. So we've already done this previously when we rotated the plane that we added to the card. So as a challenge, I want you to figure out if you can rotate the 3D model so that its feet are standing flat on the card. So pause the video now and give that a go. All right, so how did that go? So previously, our plane was standing at 90 degrees to the card, and we needed to rotate it anti-clockwise by 90 degrees on the x-axis so that it will be flush with the card. Now, we almost have the opposite problem in this case. Our Pokemon is standing as if it's flat with the card, but we need it to stand upright, so we actually need to rotate it clockwise on the x-axis by, again, 90 degrees. We just need to mess with this line, so we can use this line of code as a base, and we can change our Poke node so that it will be rotated. So let's tap into the Poke node, and let's again change the Euler angles, and we're changing it on the x-axis, and we're going to set it equal to positive pi divided by 2. And this will rotate it clockwise by 90 degrees on the x-axis, and it should hopefully make our Pokemon stand on the card. And there you have it. So our Pokemon is now standing on top of the card, and it's got its feet firmly planted on the card. And when I place it onto the ground, you can see that you can move it around, and it looks like as if I've now got a Pokemon that's standing on my card, which is pretty neat. Now, we've pretty much achieved all that we need to do, but in the next lesson, we're going to be looking at how we can add another Pokemon, so to be able to simultaneously detect 2 images and also render 2 models onto the respective image so that we can have many Pokemons on the scene at once. So for all of that and more, I'll see you on the next lesson.